Welcome to Spookin' Softly, where darkness breathes and shadows whisper. I'm your host, and tonight we venture somewhere you may not return from unchanged. Find a quiet place, turn down the lights, and let the story find you. Tonight's episode, The Lamp.
The dust of the flea market clung to everything. A fine, grimy powder that seemed to age items faster than time itself. I hated flea markets. The musty smell of forgotten things, the way people haggled over pennies. But a client had asked for something unique, something with character. He probably meant a fancy antique, not this pile of junk. But I was here, sifting through the dross, a scowl a permanent fixture on my face. My phone buzzed with another ignored call from my sister, still holding on to that petty grudge about the vacation plans. Honestly, some people just never let things go. I pushed aside a stack of yellowed comic books, my fingers twitching with impatience. Then I saw it, tucked away in a shadowed corner of a stall, beneath a moth-eaten tapestry. A lamp. It was heavy, a dark, burnished bronze, intricately carved with swirling patterns that looked almost organic, like tendrils. The shade was a deep, opaque red, hinting at hidden warmth, or maybe something more sinister. It was undeniably unique, the kind of piece a pretentious art collector would drool over. And it looked expensive. A stooped man, his face a roadmap of wrinkles, emerged from behind a mountain of old encyclopedias. His eyes, though cloudy, held a surprising intensity.
The lamp. A peculiar piece, that one.
His voice was raspy, like dry leaves skittering across pavement. How much? I cut straight to the chase, my tone dismissive. I didn't have time for a story.
It's not about the price, son. It's about the burden.
He shuffled closer, his gaze fixed on the lamp, not me. Burden! It's a lamp! Does it come with a mortgage? Just give me a number! I tapped my foot, annoyed by his theatrics.
No, not a financial burden. A different kind. It finds its way back, you see, always. And it brings something with it. Something that doesn't like the light.
He finally looked at me, his eyes wide with a strange blend of pity and fear. Right, a ghost story for the tourists. Look, I'll give you $50. Take it or leave it. I pulled out a wad of cash, already reaching for the lamp. The man flinched, as if my touch would contaminate it further.
Once it's yours, it's yours. It attaches itself. You can't just unburden yourself of it.
His words, though whispered, seemed to hang in the dusty air, a subtle tremor that raised the hairs on my arms. For a split second, a shard of genuine unease pierced my armor of cynicism. A memory flashed. My sister, tears in her eyes after one of my cutting remarks, her voice small as she said, "You always take what you want, Marcus, and you never think of the consequences." Fine. I'll take my chances with your burden. I slapped the money into his hand, grabbed the lamp by its base, and hoisted it. It was heavier than it looked, solid and cold, even in the stuffy air of the stall. I felt a slight, almost imperceptible shiver pass through it, like something stirring within its bronze shell. But I chalked it up to the vendor's weirdness getting to me. I had a client to impress, and this lamp would certainly do the trick. Back in my apartment, the lamp looked out of place. My minimalist decor, all clean lines and muted tones, clashed with its ancient, ornate presence. I set it down on a polished oak side table, wiping away the faint film of dust it had accumulated. The red shade glowed dully under the afternoon light filtering through my large windows. I plugged it in, twisting the knob. A soft, warm light bloomed, casting intricate shadows on the wall, the patterns of the bronze base magnified and dancing. It was beautiful, in a foreboding way, the perfect conversation piece. I made myself a coffee, my initial discomfort fading. The vendor was just a kook trying to inflate the price with a fabricated backstory. I scrolled through my phone, checking emails, trying to forget my sister's last ignored call. But a vague sense of unease still lingered, a faint chill that had nothing to do with the apartment's air conditioning. I kept glancing at the lamp, half expecting it to pulse or flicker. It didn't. Later, as dusk began to bleed into the sky, I decided to test its ambient light. I flipped off the overhead lights, plunging the living room into near darkness, illuminated only by the faint orange glow of the city outside. Then, I turned on the lamp.
The red light was surprisingly dim, a deep, blood-red luminescence that barely pushed back the encroaching shadows. It was more atmosphere than illumination. I thought it was perfect. The vendor's words echoed in my mind. Something that doesn't like the light. I chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. What was a lamp for if not light? I left the lamp burning and went into the kitchen to make dinner. The apartment was quiet, save for the hum of the refrigerator. As I chopped vegetables, a sensation prickled at the back of my neck. A feeling of being watched. I glanced over my shoulder, but saw nothing beyond the kitchen's sterile white walls. Just the paranoia settling in. After dinner, I returned to the living room. The lamp was still on, its red glow the only light. I decided to try turning it off, just to see what kind of darkness it would produce. My fingers brushed the cool bronze and I twisted the knob. Click. Darkness. Sudden, absolute darkness. The city lights outside seemed to recede, swallowed by an unnatural void. And in that void, I saw it. At the far end of the living room, near the hallway leading to the bedrooms, a shape. It was tall, slender, and utterly black, like a tear in reality. It had no discernible features, just an outline, a humanoid form darker than the surrounding night. It wasn't quite still. There was a subtle, almost imperceptible shimmer to its edges, like heat haze off asphalt. My breath hitched. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drum against my carefully constructed calm. This was not a trick of the eye. This was not the vendor's story. I fumbled for the lamp's knob, my fingers clumsy with panic. Click. The red light flooded the room, pushing back the dark. The shape was gone, vanished as if it had never been there. I stared at the spot where it had stood, my mind racing. My rational brain screamed optical illusion, exhaustion, an overactive imagination fueled by the old man's nonsense. But my gut, cold and tight, knew otherwise. I sat down, trembling, my eyes darting around the room. I left the lamp on. I couldn't bring myself to turn it off again. Not yet. I stayed awake for hours, staring at the red glow, listening to the silence of my apartment, straining for any sound. My sister's face, disappointed and hurt, flashed in my mind again. Was this the consequence of taking what I wanted? The world felt suddenly much larger, and I, much smaller. The next night, I was determined to prove myself wrong. It was just a shadow, a trick of light, and an old man's tale. I had to know. I had to confront it, logically. I turned on the overhead lights, flooding the apartment with bright, sterile illumination. The lamp stood innocuously on the table, its red shade a splash of color against the brightness. I paced, steeling myself. Taking a deep, shaky breath, I reached for the lamp. My fingers brushed the cold metal. Click. The red light went out.
The room plunged into darkness, but this time I was prepared. I held my breath, my eyes wide, straining to see. There it was, closer. This time, it was at the edge of the rug, closer to the sofa, perhaps only 10 feet away. The same black, indistinct humanoid shape, a void against the lesser dark. But now, I could make out a subtle impression of a head, perhaps even the suggestion of shoulders. It seemed taller, too, its form stretching towards the ceiling. A faint, almost inaudible whisper seemed to emanate from it, a sound like dry leaves rustling or sand sifting through fingers. It wasn't words, but it was sound. My resolve shattered. A whimper escaped my throat. I slammed my hand down on the lamp's knob, turning it back on with a desperate, frantic click. The figure dissolved instantly, consumed by the red light. I scrambled backward, tripping over the coffee table, landing hard on the floor. My heart was a frantic drum, a terrified rhythm against the silence. This was real. It was a thing, and it was getting closer. The vendor's warning, "It attaches itself," resonated with chilling clarity. I didn't sleep that night. I kept every light in the apartment on, including the lamp. The soft red glow seemed a pitiful defense against what lurked just beyond the threshold of illumination. I felt a cold knot of terror tightening in my stomach. The silence of the apartment, once comforting, was now oppressive, pregnant with unseen horrors. Over the next few days, I became a prisoner in my own home. I only turned off the lamp to test my theory, and each time it proved horrifyingly true. The shadow advanced. First, it was at the foot of my bed, a towering silhouette in the pitch black. Then it was halfway across the room from my bed, watching me. Then it was right at my bedside, a suffocating presence inches from my face, a faint, foul odor like damp earth clinging to it. The whispering was louder now, a soft, sibilant murmur that was just beyond comprehension, like a forgotten language spoken by the wind. I could almost feel its cold breath on my cheek. I started leaving the lamp on, even when I left the apartment. The idea of returning to a dark home, even for a moment, was unbearable. I tried to convince myself it was just a trick of the eye, that I was overtired, that I was losing my mind. But the terror was too visceral, too absolute. This thing was no hallucination. I called Paul, my only friend, a cynic even greater than myself. I needed a rational mind, someone to tell me I was insane.
Paul, you won't believe this. I bought a lamp and there's something with it.
My voice was tight, strained.
A lamp? Marcus, what are you talking about? Are you drunk?
Paul's voice was already laced with skepticism.
No, listen. When the light's off, there's a shadow. A figure. And it gets closer every time. It's following me.
I could hear the tremor in my own words.
A shadow figure? That's hilarious. You've been watching too many horror movies, mate. Or maybe you finally worked yourself into a nervous breakdown.
His laughter was loud and disbelieving, a stark contrast to my mounting terror.
No, seriously. I think it's attached to me. Or the lamp, or I don't know. The guy who sold it to me, he warned me.
I knew I sounded unhinged.
Marcus, you're the least superstitious person I know. And warned you? Sounds like you got scammed by some old codger with a good story. Look, why don't you just get rid of the lamp?
He offered the obvious solution, the one I hadn't dared to try.
Get rid of it? I can't. What if it's not the lamp? What if it's me?
The idea paralyzed me.
Oh, for crying out loud. Bring it over here. I'll take it off your hands. My apartment could use a unique conversation piece.
He chuckled again, completely oblivious to the cold dread that had taken root in my soul. His offer, however flippant, was a lifeline. If it was the lamp, getting it out of my apartment, out of my life, would solve everything. If it wasn't, well, I didn't want to think about that. I drove the lamp to Paul's place that evening, feeling a strange mix of hope and trepidation. The lamp, wrapped tightly in a thick blanket, sat silently in the passenger seat. I tried to convince myself that with every mile the presence in my apartment was receding, that the cold, watchful feeling was just my imagination. Paul greeted me with a grin and a beer.
So this is the haunted lamp, eh?
He pulled the blanket off, examining the bronze base with a curious expression. Just keep it. Don't turn it off. Ever. My voice was strained. Paul rolled his eyes.
Sure thing, pal. Maybe I'll start a seance circle. You look awful, by the way. Get some sleep.
He placed the lamp on his bookshelf, right next to a framed photo of us from college, looking carefree and young. I left quickly, the unspoken warning from the vendor echoing in my ears. It attaches itself. You can't just unburden yourself of it. I tried to ignore it. I had to believe Paul was right, that it was just a lamp. That night, for the first time in days, I turned off all the lights in my apartment. The silence was profound, the darkness absolute. I held my breath, waiting. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Nothing. No presence, no cold spot, no faint whisper. A wave of profound relief washed over me, so potent it almost brought me to my knees. It worked. Paul had the lamp. I was free. I fell into a deep, dreamless sleep, the kind of restful oblivion I hadn't experienced in a week. I woke up hours later, feeling refreshed, almost buoyant. The first rays of dawn were filtering through my windows. I stretched, a smile touching my lips. It was over. I was about to get out of bed when I felt it, a familiar, icy dread, a pressure in the room. My eyes snapped open, darting around the still dim bedroom. It was there. Not a full figure, not yet, but a rippling, shimmering distortion in the air, a patch of deeper blackness against the graying dawn, right at the foot of my bed. It was faint, almost transparent, but it was undoubtedly there. My breath caught in my throat. My heart began to pound, a frantic, desperate rhythm. It had followed me, without the lamp. The vendor's words echoed, a chilling prophecy. It always finds its way back. No, not back to the lamp, back to me. Panic, cold and sharp, clawed at my chest. It wasn't the lamp, it was me. I was the anchor. This thing was bound to me. I sprang out of bed, fumbling for the light switch. The room flooded with light, and the distortion vanished. But the dread remained. A heavy cloak draped over my shoulders. I spent the next few days in a torment of sleeplessness and paranoia. I tried staying at friends' houses, always carefully vague about why I needed a spare couch. But the shadow followed. No matter where I went, if the lights went out, even for a second, it appeared. Sometimes it was just a fleeting glimpse in the dark hallway of a borrowed apartment. Other times, it was at the foot of the bed, a solid, towering presence, the whispering louder, more insistent. The whispering. That was the worst. It started subtly, a barely audible rustle when the lights were off. Then it grew, a dry, sandy hiss that wrapped around my thoughts, too quiet to discern words, but loud enough to drive me mad. It felt like it was speaking my name, stretching it out into a long, drawn-out sibilance. Marcus. I called Paul again, my voice thin and reedy. It's still here, Paul. The shadow. It followed me! It's not the lamp, it's me! It's attached to me! Tears of frustration and fear stung my eyes.
Marcus, calm down. You need help. You're hallucinating. I told you. I've had the lamp for 3 days. Nothing's happened here. It's just a lamp.
His tone was firm, concerned, but utterly dismissive of my terror. You don't understand! When the lights go out, it's there! It's getting closer! I can hear it! It whispers! I was shouting now, my voice cracking.
Marcus, please, go see a doctor. I'll even go with you. But you can't keep calling me with this nonsense. It's stressing me out.
He hung up. I stared at my phone, the dial tone a cruel mockery. I was truly alone. No one believed me. I was trapped. I tried everything. I moved all my furniture, hoping to dislodge the presence, as if it were simply a static cling. I slept with every light on, the lamp, the overheads, even a battery-powered lantern next to my bed. But the sleep I got was fitful, filled with nightmares of being smothered by absolute darkness. The moment my eyes fluttered closed, a brief, terrifying flicker of darkness would reveal the figure, inches from my face, its blackness consuming everything. The whispering would fill my ears, 1,000 dry voices speaking in unison, saying nothing and everything. One afternoon, a brief power outage plunged my apartment into instant, blinding darkness. My breath seized in my throat. I stumbled backward, hitting the wall, my hands reaching out for nothing. The air grew instantly cold, colder than any winter chill. The silence was deafening, the absence of light absolute. The shadow was everywhere. It filled the room, a vast, swirling blackness that pressed in on me from all sides. It wasn't just a figure anymore. It was an enveloping void. And the whispering, it was a roar now, an overwhelming chorus of sibilant sounds that vibrated through my very bones. I could feel its texture, like rough, dry sandpaper against my skin, 1,000 invisible fingers brushing against me. No! Get away! Leave me alone! I screamed, my voice thin and lost in the overwhelming presence. I thrashed, trying to push against the invisible weight, but there was nothing to push. Just an expanding, suffocating nothingness. The cold intensified, a paralyzing, bone-deep chill. I sank to the floor, gasping, my heart threatening to burst from my chest. Then, with a sudden, jarring thump, the power returned. Lights flared, blindingly bright. The room snapped back into existence. The shadow, the cold, the whispering, all gone. I lay on the floor, curled in a fetal position, trembling, tears streaming down my face. I was drenched in sweat, utterly exhausted. It had almost taken me. I knew then what I had to do. I couldn't outrun it. I couldn't give it away. It was with me. I had to fight it, or at least understand it. I packed a small bag, not with clothes, but with flashlights, battery packs, and a portable generator. I would find the vendor. He had warned me. He had to know something. I left my apartment, leaving every single light on, a desperate beacon in the night. The flea market was closed, of course, just a vast, empty lot littered with the ghosts of forgotten trinkets. The stall where I bought the lamp was gone, replaced by a vacant space as if it had never existed. Despair began to set in, thick and suffocating. I drove aimlessly, needing constant motion, constant light. Gas stations, diners, convenience stores, anywhere with illumination. but the exhaustion was a relentless enemy. My eyelids grew heavy, my eyes burned. I knew what would happen if I gave in, if I let the dark claim me. I pulled over at a brightly lit, all-night diner. The fluorescent hum was a comfort. I ordered coffee, clutching the warm mug like a lifeline. I looked out the window. The sky was an inky black, dotted with distant, uncaring stars. And then I saw it. A flicker, a movement. Across the street, in the shadowed alleyway between two buildings, a tall, impossibly black figure, watching me. It wasn't waiting for the lights to go out. It was just there, standing in the permanent shadow of the alley. It had learned to exist even with light nearby. It was adapting, and it was closer than ever. I froze, the coffee forgotten. My breath caught in my throat. This was the end. It wasn't just in the dark anymore. It was manifesting, pushing its way into the edges of my world. The whispering started, a faint, dry hiss that I could now hear even over the diner's bustling noise. Marcus, come out. Come into the dark. I ran. I fled the diner, leaving my half-empty coffee and half-eaten sandwich. I started my car, fumbling with the keys, my hands shaking uncontrollably. I drove, faster and faster, no destination, just an animalistic urge to escape. But it was no use. Every time I glanced in my rearview mirror, the shadow was there, a growing blot in the distance gaining on me. It was a race I couldn't win. The gas gauge was dropping fast. My eyes were burning, raw from lack of sleep. The whispering was a constant, insistent drone in my ears. I felt its cold, shadowy presence in the car with me, pressing against the windows, clinging to the back of my seat. It was everywhere. It was me. I gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white. The road ahead blurred through my tears. I knew with a terrible, icy certainty that this was the end. It wasn't going to let me go. I pulled off the main highway onto a deserted, unlit country road, a final, desperate act of defiance or surrender. I just wanted it to be over. My vision was swimming. The darkness of the road was absolute, swallowing the beams of my headlights. The whispering was deafening now, a frantic storm of dry leaves and sifting sand, pressing in on me from all sides. The shadow wasn't just outside. It was inside the car. It was rising from the floorboards, flowing from the vents, a suffocating, formless blackness that pulsed and writhed. I slammed on the brakes. The car skidded to a halt. My heart was a frantic bird trapped in a cage of bone. I was surrounded. The air grew impossibly cold, the kind of cold that steals your breath and freezes your blood. The whispers coalesced, forming a single horrifying sound, a dry, rasping sigh right beside my ear.
What do you want?
My voice was barely a breath. The darkness solidified. It was no longer just a shadow, but a vast, consuming emptiness, an entity made of pure void. It swelled, filling the car, pressing against me, smothering me. I couldn't see anything, couldn't breathe. I felt arms or something like them wrap around me, not touching, but enveloping. I felt myself being absorbed, drawn into the black. There was no pain, no struggle, just an overwhelming, absolute cold, and the soft, dry whisper of 1,000 voices, now finally clear, speaking my name in unison, drawing it out, consuming it. Marcus. Ours. And then there was nothing. No light, no cold, no sound. Only an infinite, silent dark.
Weeks later, a realtor listed Marcus's apartment. It was found empty, all the lights still on, burning brightly in every room. A strange, persistent glow in the daytime. Paul stopped by a few times, leaving messages, increasingly concerned, but Marcus never answered. Paul eventually noticed the lamp, sitting on his own bookshelf, the intricate bronze carvings catching the afternoon light. It felt heavier than he remembered, and there was a peculiar, almost imperceptible shiver that seemed to pass through it, a slight internal hum. He tried to turn it on, but the knob was strangely stiff. He put it back, frowning. The evening drew in, and he forgot about the lamp. Later, as he prepared for bed, he turned off his lights, plunging his bedroom into darkness. The last thing he heard before sleep claimed him was a faint, dry rustle, like leaves skittering across pavement just outside his bedroom door, and a feeling of being watched. And so ends tonight's tale, The Lamp. Thank you for sitting with us in the dark. If the shadows spoke to you tonight, subscribe to Spookin' Softly and stay close. There are more stories waiting, more voices in the walls, more things that go quiet just before you notice them. Until next time, sleep well, if you can.